Hello, good friends. Welcome back to PinkPixels. It's Monday. This is the best place to be every start of the week where we get to dive into good stories, we reconnect, and it grounds us before we get into the rest of the week, buried in emails and meetings and fun projects. It is so important to give ourselves a heading, give ourselves a challenge, give ourselves an approach. And I am so glad to see so many amazing faces in chat already. It's good to see you all. I know last week we had a recording. It was still great. It was amazing. If you didn't catch it, go back, watch it. In case you didn't know, all the recordings are saved over on YouTube. So if you ever want to go back and you're like, relive your favorite moments, you can find it over on the Gamers channel. But on top of it, I appreciate seeing you all here. It is so good to tune in every week to not only have amazing guests, but to see such a good community. Here on the Gamers, it's so important that we're not just having good discussions, but we're building a place where we can find people that want to continue to uplift the gaming space, to share and embrace the voices of others so that way we can learn, we can experience, and we can become better every single day. And you all are a part of that. Yes, so we're all back. No one got trampled by mooses, and we're going to have a great conversation tonight. Let me tell you, we're going to have a good time. We've got an amazing guest. I want you all to meet Jules because you're going to love them. They're absolutely fantastic. And I've only had to talk with them like for 10 minutes beforehand, but trust me, I'm pretty much an expert on being able to read good people. And I have found a good person for you all. Well, Quan did, but I'm going to take credit for it. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's meet our guest today. Jules, say hello to everyone for me, please.
Hey, chat. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. This is a really wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Of course, of course. So tell us about yourself. You've done so many amazing things.
Thank you. Yeah, I work in video game PR. So I work in public relations. That involves wearing a lot of hats, as is very common in the games industry, but mostly marketing, strategy that goes behind marketing a bunch of games, juggling a lot of projects all at once. So a little bit of production is involved there as well. And my background mostly involves working with journalists. So making sure that your favorite games get coverage in places like IGN or different news outlets like that, but also dabbled in a bit of community and social media as well. And mostly my background is indie games, so really focusing on the smaller studios, the studios that are doing things that are really weird and different, but I've also worked with AAA, some of the best and biggest talents out there, so a pretty mixed bag in my 6-ish years. Wow. Yeah, 6 years going in the industry, working in games.
I love that. So you kind of get the full spectrum of seeing like everything in between, the different resources, the size of teams as well. It really, you're a part of telling the story. It kind of makes me think of that metaphor, like if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, like that kind of thing. Like if a game is published on Steam and no one's making a sound about it, like, is it actually published on Steam? Sort of thing. Like, do we know that things exist? So you really help make sure that you connect gamers with the games that are coming out to what they look forward to, the hype, the connecting, what they should be seeing, what they want to play out of it. There's a lot behind it, but where did it all begin? Where did you go, you know what? Let's do marketing, right? Like what point did you turn that page in your chapter and say, that's the pathway I want to go in?
Yeah, it was a happy accident.
All right, Bob Ross.
Like a lot of, yeah. Like a lot of people in the industry, I knew that I loved games as a player and I wanted to be involved in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. So ever since middle school, I was looking into different ways that I could get into this career path. And for a very long time, I thought that was going to be narrative writing and design. And that was definitely a course that I think I could have pursued. And I played a lot of narrative games. I was very enchanted by the indie, like walking sim boom of the like 2010s. That was when my education and my career was really taking off. And I had the opportunity through my college to do a study abroad program in London, and I begged and pleaded to be placed with a game company, which is really hard when you're a student. And I think a lot of other students might be facing the same challenge as they try to find their way into the games industry. But there was a very small boutique company that did marketing for video games, which was something I had never ever considered once when I was looking for pathways into the industry. And I just really wanted this opportunity to work with this agency called Bastion in London. Shout out Bastion. They are fantastic. They were very, very small at the time, and they took a chance on hiring a really weird American student, and luckily we liked each other a lot. So after that term ended, I went back to school in the States. Then I went back to London again because I just knew I just wanted to graduate and kickstart my career. I just wanted to be in games immediately. So they were very, very generous with giving me that opportunity. And then just through networking through that team, they connected me with another agency called 47 Communications, which they didn't really have a website. They didn't really have any social media presence, but 47 worked at the time still with a lot of the biggest companies in games and some smaller companies as well. And so it was just a perfect match. I immediately left London for San Francisco, did an internship out of there with 47, and went back after I graduated. So a lot of my career happened at the same time that I was taking classes and studying and doing finals. I was also writing my first pitches and coverage reports and reading every single article and getting really familiar with who was writing about what, and just falling in love with journalism too, and just games journalism in particular. As a PR person, I admire journalists and what they do, what they provide to the game industry, and making sure that little hidden indie gems don't stay hidden. And so I see a lot of my role as a mediator to help game developers find their voice, understand what it is that they're working on, because sometimes they're so Deep in the sauce that they don't really know what they're cooking at the end of the day. So I help translate what it is that they're making, and I put that into the hands of people who really understand and can get it, and can share that to people who that's their next favorite game, which is the best feeling in the world, is feeling that accomplishment on behalf of the game developers, and feel their pride at the end of the day once they get a good review, or even like some positive constructive criticism.
Like, oh, we can move forward with this. Yeah.
So it was a very happy, very, very happy accident that I got into marketing. But it does still really apply a lot of the creative thinking, creative writing type skills, and people management, emotion management, because when you're making a game and you're pouring your heart and your soul into it, and there's a lot of people on a project, a lot of the time you're also managing those people's emotions and making sure that we're all on the same page and we're all on the same team. And so there's a lot of that, and shielding people from themselves as well, making sure that they say the right thing on interviews, that they're not too nervous. So being a friendly face that can help with interview briefings and going over topics to make sure that they're prepared if they go on a stage to talk about their game, or if they're presenting it on the show floor at PAX or something like that. They feel supported and ready to face the world.
That's so good. As you were going through this, I kept trying to do a tally mark for like every task and hat that you were wearing, and I kind of ran out of fingers at a certain moment, but because you do have to do a lot. And I think sometimes when people think of it like this angle of like, oh, you're a marketer, that's one thing, like you market and that's it. But you really do have to be multi-skilled, multi-talented as you juggle so many different people coming from different angles to refine a story. You are the one who takes all of these different threads and has to weave them together into a tapestry that makes sense for people, both in the people creating it and how do we take all this that we've got jumbled in our head and we've been putting it together, and then how do we share it externally that people then understand what we've been creating. And it's not just here's the product, but like the passion, the energy, the emotion, as you mentioned, behind that. And then of course, like just the people training on alone. People are intimidating to me. How do you navigate that kind of role of honing people in, training them, preparing them to talk about what they do and all the emotions that are tied in, especially if they come with like faced with criticism or tough questions, or I mean something doesn't go right and they have to be able to handle that publicly. How do you work with people?
Everyone's different, and it does require a vibe check and being able to read the room. I think that's one of the good traits of a good PR person, is being able to sense where there is tension, or sense when actually your developer is doing fine and maybe you really need to, you know, let them go and talk for a little bit, and start to ramble to get to their point. But everyone is capable of communicating on any level. You just have to be able to help them help themselves. And when it comes to emotions, we in the PR world do things like coverage reports. So we digest and read all of the reviews, all of the articles that go live on, like, say, an embargo date, which means you embargo reviews to either the day of or the day before a game launches. And that can be really nerve-wracking, is that very moment when all the reviews go up around the same time and that Metacritic score goes up, and devs really start to get nervous because they're just watching that. Mm-hmm. So
admittedly, I'd probably have like a big glass of wine for me to handle that.
Yeah, it's terrifying, in a good way, and sometimes in a not so good way. And so having to being in the role of the person who gets to digest all of the feedback, and put that into a report to send to the developer with some good quotes, and also some of that constructive criticism, and being able to say, it's not the end of the world that this reporter or this person in the community found fault in this, but we're also seeing some trends of, people aren't really resonating with this one gameplay feature, or this is a bug. We need to get in there and fix it soon. We have to communicate to the community about that. So it's a level of prioritization as well. If there's something that's really glaring that needs fixing, that can be fixed within a game, being able to jump on that really quickly. That's where awesome community managers come in, and they are I have so much respect for community managers. They're on the front lines of any community debate, or any sort of heat as well that they get from folks and players. But for me, primarily, it's processing some negative review or even positive review, and trying to find a balance of reporting that to the developer so they can process it in a way that's helpful for them, and they go back and figure out what to do next. And as a PR person, I find it really interesting to see how other games that I'm not involved in handle issues like that, whether it's just like a complaint that they could ignore, but they add in a feature anyway, for quality of life fixes later on. And I think that's really wonderful that they respond to player feedback that way, or press feedback. Or if they just immediately get on a patch so quickly, or maybe they take a little bit of time. It's a bit of like a nerdy PR thing, I think, to just see what other PR and other game developers are doing, and apply that to what I do, and try to improve and just treat the industry as we're all in it together. We're all fans of each other.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to improve the space.
I think that's so smart though, of like learning and observing. I also love like when I see a good marketing campaign or I see like a good apology tweet, I save those. Like I bookmarked and I was like, that's well done. Like some of these things that like, especially like apology tweets, I'm like, or videos, like they don't have to be creative. They just need to be honest. And so when I see one done well, I'm like, that's it. They figured out. And I love to save them and analyze them because they're in many ways works of art. Yeah, real talk, real strategy, good strategy. When you think like, what do we choose to solve? What do we choose to answer to? How quickly do we go through it? Some things are good to answer quickly. Some things it's appropriate to be like, we're going to take our time. We're going to review this. We're going to determine the right call to action. And it's good not to rush. And so I think that's such a smart and fun and also like good little community thing. Like, yeah, we see each other's work. We appreciate it. We respect it. And it sets the bar high each time when you see like a colleagues of yours doing like good work and then pushes to be like, all right, here's what they did. I can learn from it. I can create something on my own that's going to push that even further. Like, here's how we're handling it. That can make it really fun. Do you get to talk with other PR marketers in the space often?
There are community spaces for PR, which I feel like I discovered very late. There's a Discord that's like just dedicated to game marketing, and I know there are also community manager Discord spaces, things that are moderated to make sure that everyone who's in there belongs in there and is part of the industry and is in this space. So it's a very trusted circle of peers, and I think that's wonderful to both share resources and to be honest and open and supportive, and emphasis on the supportive, because this is like all roles in the games industry. It can really burn you out very quickly working with so many people and personalities and juggling different projects, because unlike a programmer that might just be focused on one game for a few years, marketers, PR, community managers can be focused on multiple games all at the same time and juggling a lot of schedules and calendars, and it can lead to a lot of burnout. And having those spaces with your peers to be able to support them and each other is really, really valuable. And that's something that I wish I had early on. But the spaces also change. I know that the industry is very vastly on Twitter, and despite many like waves of people leaving, it's still there.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people communicate with one another, where a lot of journalists are. So we'll see when the next big space that takes over like that will be. Whether that's like really like Blue Sky is taking off. I'm interested to see what they do with their platform in the future. But
are you hopeful? Are you Blue Sky or Threads active?
I wanna cheer on Blue Sky because it's like the indie platform, while Threads is like just another Instagram, Facebook. Yeah. It's like part of that like mega conglomerate. Maybe that's just the indies person in me that wants like an underdog to win. And hopefully Blue Sky can be that. I think I do have an account. I go where the people are, and the people still are on Twitter. But I find the move to Discord also interesting in different ways. I want there to be communities like focus groups that can just hang out over one particular game or one like particular topic. But I think that's also taking a lot of the community discussion into private spaces rather than public dialogue in the way that Twitter just had, for better or worse, a lot for worse sometimes.
Right.
But Discord has its place, and I'm glad to see that people are moving there to maintain communities that they made. I was also like a Tumblr kid. I was on Tumblr during the during the deepest, darkest hours. And so I'm very familiar with people moving from platform to platform and trying to build their brand, which is something that happens with games too, when they try to have a brand on every single platform possible, which is really, really hard. So shout out to social media community managers who manage all those platforms. You are unreal.
But you're right to like point like sorry, I just heard a weird echo. You're right to point out like there's this migration, there's this evolution as the gaming space, well, even just our social spaces as people continue to evolve. And how do we build community? How do we create space? And I'm so glad, right, when you talk about like as being a marketer, being PR, to be able to find some connections, even if it is on a platform like Twitter or Discord, or even more internally, like these are connections, professional contacts that I've made that I like to reach out to. That's so important to do. And it's because as you mentioned, like that support is key. You can get burnout. But I also, especially in light of being Pride Month and talking about when we talk about support, when we talk about bringing in more of community, I want to also bring in the discussion of like queerness within the gaming space. And of course, this is a topic that is near and dear to your heart as well. And talking about how do we do representation, both as individuals, professionals, and how do companies handle this as well. In terms of support, where do you see the gaming space right now in its relation to queerness, the LGBTQIA community?
It can always be better.
Fair, yeah.
I've seen a lot of progress just from when I started, particularly when it comes to queerness and transness. And it's not perfect. It's not completely free of everything that we would really want it to be. I will take, the recent waves of hatred from certain online community spaces that just really lack perspective or try to insert the perspective onto certain communities. And that is one reason why Discord is a nice space for groups like transgender people in the industry who just want a safe space to commiserate together and to support each other and to promote and share those resources.
Well, and simply put, live, right? Just to have the same fun and space that everybody else has.
Yeah, I think that there has been online spaces just dedicated to living openly and out and being queer. And I love seeing people feel very comfortable using their pronouns, even if they're cis. And that was something I definitely encouraged when I was getting more comfortable with my identity on a professional public setting. That was a really big step for me when I started to use they, them pronouns in the workplace. I was very emotional at the time. I was very sensitive to being misgendered. And while that sensitivity hasn't completely gone away, I think the confidence in my own identity has really solidified since then. And I feel the support of community and just being able to be seen while also feeling very comfortable knowing who I am. That took a lot of time to get there. And just like it was a happy accident that I got into the industry, it was also, I feel like, a happy accident that I was able to find myself in my identity and was thankfully given the tools to do so through games and through the people who make them. I think having queer people and LGBT people within the space pushing hard for leadership decisions that create spaces within games themselves, within the communities, around games, for people to also feel seen. I I really love what has been going on in the Sims community.
Yeah.
And also I love it makes sense, but the like rallying of queer fans around horror games, it's like such a specific
Didn't it
like
start with
type
like
of
Babadook
fandom.
or something?
Yeah, well, there's like such a special history and relationship between queer people and horror as a genre and just as a concept, that it's no surprise to me that uh, queer people also really love horror games. But I really love like just peeping my head into that community, because I'm too chicken to play horror games.
The
But
Observer. It's okay.
I like seeing games like Signalis exist,
Mm.
and I really, really, really love watching the fandom just thrive around that. Yeah, it reminds me of those Tumblr days when people were just making fan art like crazy. I love queer fandom. It's beautiful, and it's so beautiful around games too.
There's a lot I want to unpack in this, because you mentioned so many good things, but also the layers when we talk about being queer on like within the gaming space. Like there's one like as individuals, like when we go into the space, our identity, who we are, and even when you mention like your own degree of confidence, because it's not like we are always perfect, and not that we even should like compartmentalize of like here I am as a worker, here I am, like as a person who skis, here I am as a dog person, here I am with my identity, right? Like there's different, we're all, and we like to say like we bring our whole selves to work. That's what brings especially the creative elements and the human elements to life that make our work very valuable, especially in such an art centric space that gaming is. And then there's like the companies themselves. How do they make spaces that are safe, that are thriving, that are supportive, both socially and structurally? And then it's also externally for the communities that they're building, the fandoms that they develop and they support, or if they sometimes have them as separate, right? Like we draw upon them sometimes only on the month of June, or or do we fully embrace every year, every month, in every action that we do, right? Like there's so many different ways in which we can view and talk about how do we make progress, and seeing it on the individual to the big company side. For
Mm-hmm.
you, I wanted to start a little bit, if you're comfortable with this, in your own journey of what that was like to start to even introduce like pronouns in the workspace. Because I mean, I remember the very first time of like adding it to my email signature, and then I would get colleagues going, why are you doing that? Just the initial discussion of where suddenly something that you're doing that should be easy is a small discussion point here or there at odd times. And I didn't know what your journey was like with this.
Yeah, I think my journey started.
May not be the right word. You can toss that
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
trash if
No,
you don't like it.
I think it started around the time. It took me a long time to get used to the word queer in the first place, because like a lot of people, I was told that queerness was a very derogatory term, and it still is used derogatory.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very comfortable reclaiming it at this point, but it wasn't even too long ago when I was having discussions with friends and we were talking about how we identify,
Yeah.
and being very open about being uncomfortable with identifying as queer and being uncomfortable with other people putting that label upon us. And I do still think that it is a label that uh, it's best to apply it to yourself in your immediate community that you do know
Mm-hmm.
is comfortable with that. I wouldn't just like point to someone and call them queer without their permission.
Permission.
Or I think it's also queerness as a identity in the same way as LGBTQ. It is an identity the same way that being a lesbian is an identity,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also a framework for understanding the world. And it took me a long time to understand that, until I started to interact with people just around the New York City, Brooklyn space where I live.
Yeah.
And actually getting offline and touching grass a little bit and speaking to people who are trans and are queer and are both, and understanding that queerness is actually more of an ideology. It's a way of breaking boundaries within your mind, which sounds nuts. It sounds nuts when you put it that way.
Don't frame it that way. Come on.
It is recognizing binaries are everywhere and there are structures everywhere, and it is like a very deep personal rejection of those structures. And like you were getting at, it's an intersectional identity, and it's understanding that everything is intersectional, and bringing that intersectionality into everything, and understanding the world like that. And if you really start to understand games as an artistic medium, they are also a bit queer, because it's not on a binary. It involves an intersection of so many different mediums and arts and crafts, and it's audio, it's actual art, it's design, it's programming, and all of that feels very queer, because it's not just one thing, it's everything. It is what you want it to be, which to me is at the heart of queerness. And I think that queerness as a ideological, even political framework for understanding the world can and should be applied to games as much as possible. And applying a lot of the values of intersectionality as cooperation and community and sustainability, embracing all of those levels. And it's hard to do that. It's really hard to shake the structures of business in the games industry. And I think that the indie space is doing a really, really fantastic job of giving it a shot ethically under capitalism, which is
hard,
difficult. It's hard.
Yes. Because it's obviously competing against other companies that are playing by very different rules and expectations and moralities, and to be thriving and wanting to hit other checkpoints of success, that's difficult to do. I really like your approach. Just it seems so accurate. Like, it hit me like, oh yeah, that seems absolutely making sense when you talk about video games being queer, like how multifaceted they are, and not tied to just like, it's one thing. This is the category that it's in. It's just this type of art and that's it, and no other mediums that are involved, or just this type of individual and that's it. I think that certainly helps change and give a very different approach to what you mentioned of like, how do we see the word queer and how we apply it. That's, I imagine that also does take a lot of conversations in discussing how do we see queer even within communities, of saying like, yes, we understand the term, but how do we see it within society? How do we make sure that we're all using similar definitions, thus then similar frameworks? That is hard to move forward, especially when you talk about as a society. I love this. I excuse my pause because I'm appreciating it. Kind of like its own work of art of like, I really like this approach, and I'm surprised I've never heard this before. And maybe that's because I'm kind of showcasing perhaps my own living under a rock a little bit. But what is that like to start to see more of these discussions and doors opening to be able to address what queerness looks like even beyond just as an individual?
Yeah, I first really started to understand queerness as it's both on an individual level, but it's more like how you relate to other people and to yourself, and trying to I guess to break it this way, queerness, if you think about it as a rejection of normativity, which is very often cis, is very often white, and hetero.
Yeah.
Things
Especially
like
within like
adding,
US centric culture.
yeah,
Yeah.
that too. It's very, very centered around, white European sensibilities.
Mhm.
And the way that that is, spread everywhere, through films, through games, through everything, all media. And how can we fix that? And I also don't think that like queerness has all of the answers, but that is
Mhm.
part of intersectionality, is being able to ask the answers and let others try to come and step in and fill in those answers. So if you are thinking about ways to queer a workplace,
Yeah.
which is sometimes a weird question to bring up when you're thinking about a workplace, like how do you queer it?
Or
Like
to use
pronouns in bio?
yeah.
Sure. But I think it's also like breaking the the boundaries of understanding what a workplace really is. Having more human wellness centered practices in workplaces, having a very collective structure, giving everyone an opportunity at leadership at some point.
Mhm.
Things like unions and collective power is very queer. And it's really that type of understanding that I was learning when just interacting with spaces in New York City that are also involved in just a lot of on the ground work outside of the games industry, just trying to make the world a better place and showing up to marches and protests
Yeah.
and just community discussions. I would so often find queer people and trans people, in particular, at the forefront of local movements that were just trying to better people's lives. And so I think being able to listen to those voices and give them the space to ask questions, to really interrogate what it means to like be in the world.
Mm.
It's not an easy task, but I think it can be done. And having support systems, letting uh, oftentimes studios and big companies will have like DEI groups, where they can put their special identifying employees in little groups where they can have a group chat, and then they don't actually ask them how they can improve the actual company that they work in, or the game that they work on. I think it's really important to actually utilize those spaces internally and any sort of focus groups,
Yeah.
and actually apply their feedback to the game, and to also listen to the community that maybe sometimes arises unexpectedly around a game. Um, Whether you knew you were making a game for that would be huge in the queer community or not, there are still those fans out there, and they probably have some interesting things that you haven't even thought of, to hear. So that was a lot, but
I love that. Give
yeah.
us a lot. I want to be drowning in this. This is very exciting for me. I've never been so excited to drown before. Um, I like the idea, and I've never heard queer used as a verb. Like if we queer a workplace, that's very fun sounding. But you're right. Like it is recognizing all of these barriers, these norms that we've set up, and it puts us into boxes. And especially in a space that it's artistic, we're supposed to be creative, that we're supposed to allow for more voices. That's how we create games that are new, that are fresh, that are better. We really have to be open to breaking those down. But I love that you were so clear of like, here's some good actionable steps. Like even where there are some good first parts of the steps, like the DEI initiatives, or the share groups that they create. But instead of siloing them or making them only like venting sessions, like actually then channeling it forward, is really good to help people understand like, what does this actually look like? Because that can be intimidating. Unfortunately, like the realness of it is when people hear sometimes the word queer, they're scared of what that means. for people who are already protected by the walls and barriers that have, and even if it isn't, even if they're not protected, there's a sense of familiarity sometimes that goes, why are we asking for change? Why are we making things harder? Where we have to now have more discussions. And I'm not saying that's right, but it's recognizing like that can be a barrier sometimes, that people are resistant because they don't know what that is. It's that fear of the unfamiliar, that fear of exploration, that fear of reflection. And we love our shortcuts as people. We love to be able to like see a title and be like, okay, I have an understanding of who you are. And it allows us to move quicker in sometimes what we think like the relationship building, the workplace assimilation. It makes it easy for us to feel like we found our people, if you will. And that's, I mean, again, I feel like that is one of the biggest barriers that might hold us back in bringing more queerness into the space, is just that desire of familiarity, the desire of shortcuts.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying about like pronouns and getting some curiosity or even like some slight pushback from people, even asking like a cis person of why they would do something like that. It was an interesting process for me to encourage my peers, which did take a little bit of education on like a company level, and it was uncomfortable, but it's asking for so little really in the end, and it just levels the playing field for someone like me who uses they them pronouns to feel comfortable saying so, because other people are saying she, her, he, him. I can say that, and it feels small, and it's I try to put myself in the shoes of a cis person who feels uncomfortable being asked to do like very little, and they feel just the tiniest bit of discomfort calling attention to something that they can just completely take for granted, which is their gender presentation. And I think
call it out,
having like that visible pronouns, it's just the tiniest step to queering society and asking people to reflect and ask the right questions, which is, what is my gender presentation? What's yours? That's cool. Like, and being okay with it. Yeah. Because once you start asking questions, then you start being accepting of different answers that you might not be expecting. And it feels like a very small move. I think it is a very small move, but it is a meaningful move.
It is.
And
don't even put it under that disclaimer.
Like
I think it's no, you're right. It is. Plain and simple. It's a small move. And I think that's so important. Like, let's just be direct around it. Like, these are small inconveniences that are not really inconveniences. Like, we're framing them as problems, but in the scheme of wanting to respect another human being, it is no price to pay at all just to ask. It really is. Yes. I mean, I think that's important. Just like no disclaimers of like, I think this would be easier. It's so important like that. I feel like you're giving a kindness, a little bit of grace, and that where is not is perhaps too kind of you to offer in that moment. But I think there's also been a challenge of needing to be sensitive when asking for basic respect, which is also unfair. Of how much it has to be to fight for, like, I would just like if you would ask me what pronouns instead of just assuming. And you have to be overly polite in that request and how you do it and when you do it or how often you can ask, and just to be seen how you want to be seen in that space.
Yeah. There was a specific turning point for me in my gender presentation and my outedness, especially in the workplace, which was at the time my whole life. I put everything into my work and my job, and so it mattered a lot to me how people at my workplace perceived me and how I presented myself to them. and there was a opportunity for me to work on a very special game to me. I think it's one of the best games that deals with queerness, period. And that's a game called If Found by Dreamfeel. And I was just a few years into the industry, and I had the chance to once again beg and plead and try to work my way into working on this game. And I also really wanted to work with the client Annapurna Interactive, which is fantastic. And I heard from a colleague that they were working on this very LGBTQ game, and they didn't really quite know how to do the PR around it in a respectful way, and they didn't quite know how to refer to the characters, or they were scared to ask the pronouns of the developers. And so I was like,
wait, hold on. Scared to ask the pronouns of the developers?
It's, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I want to put myself, again, in the shoes of a cis person doing it for the first time and not knowing if they're doing it right.
Yeah.
And I have respect for my colleagues who were working on that at the time and were very, they wanted to be respectful.
That's
and good. They're entering a culture and a space that they know is not theirs, and they didn't know what to do. And so I just swooped in and was like, "Hi, I'm Jules. Like, what's your deal?" And it was a really special moment where I was able to really understand the game immediately, and was really touched by its premise and its characters and the team making it. And it was this incredible moment where I saw people like me making games really for the first time, and I got to interact with them on a professional level, and it was life-changing, really. And I got to see the game succeed on a really amazing critical level.
God.
And to hear it resonate with people and to say that it's like one of their favorite games of all time is so cool. I'm so happy for the teams. Shout out Laura. That was a moment where I was like, I am out, I am queer in the workplace, and here I go. And then it took about a year or two after that for me to start using they them pronouns and really like feel comfortable being non-binary or in trans at work. But it was a opportunity to work with to see someone that I wanted to be when I grew up in a way, and to work on the game that I knew probably was people's awakening moment as well. And that was really, really special, and that reminded me of like why I do it in the first place. And so any opportunity I get that I can work with other developers who are queer like me or trans, that's really special. And I love the community and the support that games like that really foster. It's so beautiful.
I love that. I love that. You're just like so bright right now when you were talking about it. But you come to life, and I think that's the moment that we want to see everyone be able to have in the gaming space, where you work with a company on a game with people that see you, that support, and it tells a story to people that you know will have the impact that you want for them, whatever that story may be, or whoever those people might be. It's being able to create something that is meaningful. So I think it's great. One, kudos that, of course, your friends are like, listen, we want to make sure we do it right. Can you come help us? I think that's such a smart thing. Instead of blundering our way through, raising a flag and asking for help is the best thing. Like, it's opening up that discussion that we mentioned earlier. Like, be willing to be uncomfortable. Be willing to know when you don't know how to do something, or to ask is so much better than just sticking with our norms, sticking with whatever we feel comfortable with already, and seeing how meaningful that is for you. I wrote down the game, If Found. So this is now on my to-play list, everyone. In case you all need another game to add to your list, there's another one to put onto it. But I love kind of talking about how almost kind of like that feeling of home. Obviously, work and home life, those are two different things. I personally have some hesitations when companies go like, we're like a family here, because that often is like a red flag of like, we're not going to pay you as much and you're expected to treat us like family and go bend over backwards for us.
Yeah.
That's not always the case. There are some places that are, but your workplace, you spend so much time there. You put so much effort, mental, emotional, physical, that it should be a place that also feels in its own sense like its own version of home. It should be a place that you can be you, that you can be thriving, that you can be excited about the work that you're doing at the end of the day, and what you're creating, what you're putting out there in the world, especially for our industry that we're in. And so for you to be able to do that is fantastic. I think so many people hear that and go, that's that. I want what they're going through. I want that for me. What they have for that reaction, that's what I want for me. Right? Like, that's why people go into art spaces like this, is that they want to create meaningful moments no matter where they are in that company. For you, what are signs that companies are moving in the right direction? There you go. That's green
Um,
flags. I want to work with them, right? Like that kind of mentality. Like, how do you find the good ones?
yeah, I think there are so many that I would call like green flags that a studio does. Um, just to name a few, I think like having um, very transparent pay structure, especially if you're hiring, which I know a lot of people are looking for positions right now, and a lot of the best places are very, very transparent with the benefits, things that they can actually materially provide to their employees, and um, being very grounded in that materialism that we all need to survive, and not overpromising things. Um, and things like this is rare, but I see it happening more, is the 4-day work week, which at my new position at Pop Agenda, there's a 4-day work week, and I know that it will change my life. And I've heard from so many other people that it has created a work-life balance that they've always wanted, and it's not a cure to burnout, but it is definitely a way to humanize the workplace by giving people time to be human, away from just labor, and also properly crediting everyone in the credits of a game, and being very open and honest of who worked on what. It breaks my heart when I hear of people who work on a game and aren't credited because they left the project halfway or something like that. I think if you have a hand in a project, giving someone that the very simple gesture of recognition for that work, I think that goes a long way for someone's career, and also just their mental well-being, that they get to point to something and say that I did that.
That makes sense.
It means so much.
Like, their work is in there. It should. Okay. I didn't.
Yeah. And I also really love to hear of studios, and often, I won't say all the time, but often these are queer, minority-led studios that are actually diverse and have a lot of different, traditionally marginalized voices and people on the team. And they are able to take leadership positions, and they're able to craft a accurate and fair level of representation. And representation is a very slippery slope that we can definitely get into, but to be able to have marginalized people on the team to create a project that they feel, again, like it was awakening point maybe for someone else, or the game that they always wanted to see exist out in the world, with the character that they feel like they could be or could see in their community. I think it really takes people hired and also given leadership to create and craft that type of character or experience. Even game mechanics can be queer. It doesn't have to be like a queer character for a game to feel queer, in my opinion. I think when you start to have more diverse people on a team creating a game, you start to have some really interesting mechanics and ways of seeing the world through games as that art medium, and very different experiences. One of my favorite games to come out in the recent year, Thirsty Suitors and also Mediterranean Inferno, both like very out of the box games that I just absolutely adored, and had scenes and moments in them that I was like,
what is this? I love it.
this can only exist in an indie space with people creating reality based on what they experience in real life. And I think that's truly special, and you see those studios really like walking the walk and talking the talk when they actually have really positive workplaces that tend to be small because it's ambitious to create. It's unfortunately ambitious to create a game that features those voices so prominently. But I think that indie studios and indie teams are really the space for experimentation, and experimentation is queer. It's queerness. So I love to see it.
I love that. That's such a good point for people getting into the space. If you want to do experimentation, if you want something different and new, go to the indie space. There's going to be a lot more openness and welcoming and flexibility to appreciate that so much more. But as you went through that list, I was thinking, there's so much of how do they handle this socially, but there's clear markers structurally too, like having the 4-day week. Like, you're right. It doesn't solve burnout, but these are structures to help prevent it. Right. Or having individuals within leadership doesn't always solve it, but it helps bring more voices, and it's more likely that the space is welcoming. You're going to have better policies. You're going to have better culture overall. And so these are things that are so important. Now, you talked and mentioned a little bit about representation. So I want us to be able to pull that thread. Let's take a little bit of a breather. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back. Y'all, don't go too far. Get your bathroom break. Grab your water, your hot tea, your coffee. If you're a caffeinated person, good luck to you. I'd be shaken. But whatever you need, you grab it, and we'll see you all in a few minutes. right, good friends. We are back here at Pink Pixels. We've got Jules joining us, and we have been talking about the video game industry, especially its approach around queerness. Let's talk now as we dive into talking about representation. Sometimes it's authentic, sometimes it's performative. Let's start with the broad overview, especially now that we're in Pride Month. Certain companies are very happy to share their articles and posts and company events and characters that they've created. What are some of the things that you're seeing this month?
Yeah, from a PR perspective, one thing that I would always do with whatever clients I'd be working with at the time is to try to pitch to journalists and to news outlets like here are some queer games, some LGBTQ games for the month of Pride, and to try to get those like top 10 type lists. And I'm not trying to like cast any shade onto that type of articles.
They're good to have.
Typically,
yeah,
I find a lot of really good recommendations from news like that, and it was just like a very common practice to do from the PR side, and I would also feel very proud to have be working with games that have that type of representation. But it is also funny to be doing that from the PR side, and then also just from me being a regular human, being a fan out there in the world, reading things and hearing the community, like all just collectively roll our eyes when on June 1st, like clockwork, all of the rainbow icons start coming out, and everything is suddenly all queer.
Emotes.
Yeah, for the month, and then right at the end, just like clockwork again, all that goes away, and we can all stop being gay. And it is like funny, you can laugh at it, but it does also bring the point of, is this performative? Is this a form of rainbow capitalism? Which is like the understanding that we have money to spend and companies want that money. So they will, do their little song and dance for us to get us to spend their money on their games. Even if their games aren't actually very good for the community, or if it's like completely, I don't know, it just doesn't feel quite right.
It's not authentic.
To be using the aesthetics of queerness, but not actually having the praxis there, not actually embodying any of the values, or actually listening to the community in any way. It's just rainbow washing, or pink washing, as it's sometimes called. And I think there needs to be, as part of the collective, groan that we do from the community, I do think that within the industry there needs to be a lot of reflection of the structural changes that can be made to actually be authentic and be real, and to not just put on the rainbow colors for 1 month. And I think you could also say that about any month that is a diversity month. I think that companies all year round should be having very deep discussions internally about ways that they can uplift their marginalized employees, but also understanding that it is a capitalist system, and at the end of the day you are going to be getting that money from those consumers, and internally that can feel gross sometimes. So I don't have the answers for getting rid of capitalism and what that looks like.
Can't you just solve all of this for us? Come on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, step one.
Yeah.
But I do think that there needs to be a lot of conversations about ways to be inclusive internally before feeling so emboldened to be inclusive externally once a year, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially
and
as that capitalistic, like it's you're profiting off of a
yeah,
community and the identity, right, of individuals. Like it's a putting on very much like a mask to say, here we are, we're gay this month, so give us money. And then after that, they shirk off all the responsibilities, the conversations, the support that should be going year round to support. That's a challenge, right? At the end of the day, of how do we create something that is so much more lasting and not the pink washing, the rainbow washing, as you mentioned. I think it would be fair of us to note, like, even like, of course, here we are at Pink Pixels. We've had a little bit more highlight. We do, of course, throughout the year, but like, we're having this conversation right now during June and being very open with it. The challenge is, even when we see things like this, like when we have the show or something like this, it's thinking like, are we doing it just because it's Pride Month, or is it just like we lined this up? June is when we happen to have this schedule, and this is also what the speaker wanted to talk about, sort of thing. Also, what are we doing throughout the year, right? There has to be a bigger reflection, and recognizing as we critique studios, like even this platform that we're on. How do we constantly, I mean, obviously you don't have to reflect on that. That's not your responsibility to be taking care of the gamers this way. But here you are as a guest on here. I think it's important, just as at least a little self-awareness, right? As we turn the light on others, that we also recognize how I, as a host, am currently playing a role within this space. Which I hope you don't feel like this is performative, but that's where we have to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? How are we doing this?
I think a lot of the times the question is who really benefits from the representation. Is it the people being represented, or is it the company that is reaping the profits? And when you as the community, you have to draw the line between, is this representation that feels good, or is this exploitation that it feels like you are like parading my identity for like some other profit. This profit doesn't come back to me in any way. It's not providing me any meaning, or I think that's a conversation that a lot of communities have. And as a broad example, when like certain like dances get applied to emotes in games, and those people who created the dances and the community that created the dances doesn't get the proper credit. Not naming any names, but that's an example of exploitation, where the profit doesn't go back to the true authentic person being represented. It's just aesthetics or spectacle in a way. And so I think part of reclaiming the industry as a queer person is being able to actually profit from that representation, and not just in material ways, although
that helps.
Making money and capitalism is awesome, but also to have that moment of recognition where you feel seen. And also, representation doesn't always have to be positive, in my opinion. This might be a controversial opinion, but I think I support gay rights and gay wrongs, and I love messy characters that are flawed and reflect on those flaws and get better over time, or they're the anti-hero and they're the villain. There's a very long history of queer people being villains, and that goes back to
Ursula
censorship,
right? Yeah, like right, like, you see that. I see script, gay rights and gay wrongs. We love that phrase. But you're right, because like as humans, it's not like a monolith, like this is the gay person, right? Like this is how all gay people act. We all have our decisions. It kind of reminds me of the lighthearted joke of like women serial killers, you know, represent, you know, like, because you know there's not like this one clear narrative of what we do, how we act, but there's the diversity of how we handle situations poorly or well, how we find redemption or not find redemption. And it's again seen more than just as like you are a gay person. You are a person. And yes, you are gay. And yes, you are also this and also this. Like that it's again recognizing the complexity of humans and being more than just a title.
Yeah. And I think as we think about the ways that representation has evolved within games over time, I think a lot back to Dragon Age 3. And there's I forget his name, but there's a trans character in that game. And there's a moment where you can ask him questions about being trans, and they're pretty uncomfortable questions as the player, as a trans person, to be like clicking this button, like asking this character questions. But I was just had this like morbid fascination about what the answers would be, and it's handled quite well.
Okay.
For the time. I think it was an opportunity for the developers to, through a character, explain a little bit to someone who maybe wouldn't understand. And it's that kind of character that feels very of that time, where there was a need for an explanation and a need to really hold the hand of the player and say like, okay, this character's trans, here's what that means. Okay, now we're going to move on, but they're still trans, remember that.
Yeah.
And I want to see more unapologetically trans characters and queer characters that just are and don't need an explanation. You don't really need to like have a whole dialogue menu of like, what does trans mean to you? It just is. And I think we'll be seeing that more and more. And you know, shout out again to two of my favorite very queer games from the past year. Mediterranean Inferno had one of my favorite scenes of a game. It just made me like crack up. I don't know if it was supposed to be funny, but
you found it.
These three like extremely troubled gay boys like show up, and they start hanging out with their friends who do not know what is happening with them, and it's just like a very real moment that reminded me of like my friends, and when we all come together as like a queer community and just like share whatever messy drama we're all in, and also like giving perspective to one another. Like it really isn't that deep. It was just one of those moments where it just felt really nice, like mid game, to see something like that.
I think that kind of goes along with the gay rights and gay wrongs. Like not everything has to be like it's a big heavy moment, but like here are silly little things that we share, right? Like it's just those shared communities that's like, yes, this is for us, but it doesn't have to feel like a deep drama. Like, oh, I'm gay. This is the troubles. Like it shows the levels in which things can be experienced and much more realistic.
Yeah, and also this pressure for any marginalized character, any character that is like in a lot of games there's like a diversity character, and that character has to carry with them all of their culture and all of the baggage and trauma that comes associated with that culture, and they have to just bear it all. And while I think it's, you know, awesome that there are layered characters that are dealing with a lot of like grief and pain, but there are two thoughts here of just having a character just be a character without needing all the baggage of, you know, bearing the the culture, that they have to be able to translate that to a player every single time. And also just being able to just be joyful, without being like the classic stereotype, like traumatized LGBT person. It's like the bury your gaze trope is like so overdone. And it still happens, and it drives me nuts whenever I see it in a game. And I do think that we're moving beyond that a little bit too, but also exploring, again, bringing up horror and queerness, exploring some of those traumatic, morbid topics through the lens of queerness, because horror topics were also considered taboo at the same time as queer topics. So those things are very intertwined. And so I love to see games like Grave Seasons. That's a murder mystery, like farming sim that's coming up soon. I'm so excited to see what that team does. That's what a good idea.
What an interesting twist. It was not where I thought you were going with that description.
And there's also a game that's just like pure gay joy, building relationships, which is a game where you play as a house and you're a gay house. That's it. Like,
that's it. That's all there is.
That's goofy as hell. I love it. Give it to me.
I want to play just because it sounds fun. Like, why not? Let's see what this is like. Yeah.
And it's those sorts of things that I think can like only exist now, after we've had a lot of those conversations and we got like a lot of that like bad, rough representation kind of out of the way, hopefully. And we're like, okay, we had to process like all that bad character development. Now let's own our stories and let's be the ones to tell them.
Yeah.
And again, I think indie studios are the paving the way for players to be able to have that media literacy where they're able to just see queerness and see transness on screen and unflinchingly just like, but also just be about queerness. I love that. It's like such a time to be in the industry.
There's so much more.
Like,
yeah. I like that when you're talking about Dragon Age 3, you kind of put the asterisk like for the time. But you're right to note this timeline in which we've been going through, because video games have this ability to reach such a broader audience. Like there's an audience that can resonate with, but as we've talked about this in some of the other episodes as well, how video games have been such an educational tool for on many levels of like, how do we interact? How do we make good decisions? Even like with games like Mass Effect, like, your Renegade versus Paragon, like it gives you a sense of like, what are good actions? What are bad actions? Choosing to kill these people, that's considered a bad action, but shooting and fighting in this one is considered a good. Like it gives a sense of how do we frame things? What do we consider norms at this? And now that we've gone through this, as you kind of said, like this literacy, right? We're getting caught up on our education of like, all right, here's some basic things that were kind of clunky, but we got through it. Now we can go through this refinement because the gaming audience as a whole is becoming more, we've gone through some of that clunkiness, but we've become much more open and accepting and hungry for better narratives. We want to see those more human stories instead of tropes. We want to see the reflection of who a person is and their complexity behind it. And we want to have the fun, the joy, the silliness, the drama, all of it, and not just within a single representation, but when we have options. One character doesn't have to do all of it. If there's more than just one person with a certain representation, makes it a lot easier to spread that burden out, to talk about what and who and why we tell certain stories. For you, sorry, go for it. Don't let me jump in.
Go. What's your question?
Well, so you've mentioned like a few of the games that you're really excited about that are coming out, or Scrib and I need to know again about more about this gay house. We're not letting that one go because that just sounds amazing. But when you see some of these games, what is your hope for this industry as we continue down this road, as we continue and look further down the timeline and the evolution of how do we tell stories? How do we market? How do we create games that move further away from the tropes?
Um, I'll answer the how do you market, because I think that it ties back into one of the ideas I was trying to express, where like just querying the things that you do on a day-to-day like business level, and you'll never quite get away from the fact that you're doing business, but you can at least try to humanize it and try to queer it. And so when it comes to marketing a game, I think that really means understanding and listening to the audience in the community in ways that aren't exploitative, in ways that aren't just for profit. At the end of the day, it's all for profit, but having community managers, PR people really understand what it is that people want and what people expect, and being able to be the connecting piece of that expectation. I really like to see the thriving ecosystem. It's amazing, actually, just how much it's grown since I've started my career, of creators and streamers to be the ones that are doing the connecting, who are sort of doing their own game PR, and the indie content creators, the indie streamers who love to find like the next big thing and are willing to take weird risks and play weird games that might not be the next Elden Ring. It might not get them like all the views, but it is something that they just really enjoy and find pleasure in trying. I really admire a lot of the creators who are willing to take risks like that, and I do think that having a lot of respect for creators and what they do and what they bring and offer to the community and to the space, that's something that I would like to see a lot more thought go into from marketing approaches in general. Is where can we start to talk to the community, and how can we help creators be that bridge, and help them do what they do best, and try to connect developers with those creators who can be their biggest fans. It's really amazing what just one creator can do for a game and help build community around that, and giving those creators also the time to do that, and respecting their work as work, and their labor as labor. And having just a general like more collaborative ecosystem versus competitive. We're always thinking about what's the competitive landscape, what are our competitors, but really it's like, okay, this person did something very similar with their game, let's see what the fans are like. I think it's just changing the mindset of a lot of studios and marketers to understand collaboration versus competition. And that's something that I would love to see more in the future. It's something that I really tried to apply to my own practice, and not be fearful of a lot of old PR traps, of things like ascribing value to the length of a game, or that's an old one where we just didn't really want to talk about how long a game was when interacting with press and the public, because people would perceive a 2-hour game as something less. But I think with indies we've seen a big change in that perspective. So there's a lot of just mindfulness perspectives and ecosystem perspectives that have to shift from the inside, and also understand that you're competing again, you're collaborating
Yes.
with all the media that everyone plays and interacts with, including film and TV. That's another way that people use their time if they're not playing games. So how do you set yourself apart, but also embrace some of the larger media landscapes as part of a games marketing strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the rise of we're in like a renaissance of animation, like Scavenger's Reign.
Yeah.
Really tight fan base, and I see a lot of interlap between people who just love really interesting, creative, artsy games, and people who love really interesting, creative, artsy animated shows and movies. So I think there's a lot of interaction and perspectives to be explored there.
Yes, I love that. As Infiltrating Moms putting like hashtag indie revolution, it really gives the space to talk about it differently. And I like that you mentioned like that challenge of within marketing of how, especially with PR, like how you're talking about the games, what do we mention? How do we approach audiences? Like how it also has to evolve, how we go about this. And even the challenge of fighting against what might be the push of, well, what's going to get us the most numbers? What's going to get us the most sales versus resonating with the right audience that you want to get to. It's very interesting to me to see which leads. Is it the game and the audience that's pulling it forward, or is it the marketers who have the chance to really say, let's do something different, who has, as you even mentioned at the very beginning, like you're the mediator, you're the translator behind this game to saying like, here's who this is for. Here's the story that we're trying to reach for it. Here's what actually matters. And how the audience's understanding of it can change depending on how you put it.
Yeah. Lost my train of thought, but yeah, that's completely right.
Yeah. I'm just really fascinated, of course, like how we market and what we think matters within this space. And even as you mentioned, like we're competing against other things. Yes, TV shows, podcasts, movies, right, at the end of the day. But I like the change of like, is it competing, or are these opportunities to say like, if you like this, here's also this. I'm now waiting. For when it comes to books, I love anthologies. I need someone to put together like a bundle of small short games of like, here's an anthology of short games for you. If you like this, just put them all together. Not like in a set list, like let me buy them as a package. Let me know what those anthologies come out and translates over, because I think you're right to say it takes a big shift in this space of, instead of seeing it as competing, how do we start giving that next line of thought, especially if we can move more into this approach that you don't need a 28, 40-hour game to feel like this was a valued game. That length does not equal quality at the end of the day. For you, what are some of the challenges that you see in trying to convince people to play a game, right? Like, trust me, especially if it's like a newer studio, this might be one of their first few games out. They're still trying to build their audience, get that reputation. How do you go like, trust us, you're going to love this?
Oh, it's so tricky. It's like the never ending challenge of PR. It's just like, trust me, you'll love it. For that type of pitch to journalists, it takes a lot of time and patience and attention from a PR person. But over time, you really do start to recognize which journalists really enjoy a particular genre. And some journalists, I think, are really open and honest about which genres they prefer over others, and that's really great. But others, it takes sort of like a close reading of their coverage and what sort of writing that they do, to really see what types of mechanics and themes click with certain journalists. And it's such a nice feeling to be able to reach out to a writer and say, I saw that you loved this one particular game, and I read your review, and you really liked these mechanics, and boy, do I have the next project for you of this other game with a bunch of really interesting mechanics that are similar and that you might like. And just really like level on a one-on-one type basis with a reporter like that.
Yeah.
It's such a human interaction. And I know from just talking with journalists that they feel really seen and appreciated and understood when a PR person, when a marketer approaches them like that. And it is hard for a PR person to have the bandwidth to do that close reading and to understand, all the in and outs of who is writing about what all the time. But it is a really special moment when you have a game with something really interesting going on and you're able to be like, I know exactly which reviewer, which features writer would just absolutely love to talk to the devs more about this. It's a really awesome feeling. It's so rewarding to be a fly on the wall of an interview where a developer and a journalist just like completely click and understand each other.
Do you feel like a matchmaker at that point?
Yeah, that's really what PR is, just matchmaking with the right people.
Yeah.
And sometimes that it doesn't quite click, but it's always worth the patience and the understanding and lending that to another person, and just understanding that they're doing their job too. So let's make all of our jobs
easier,
enjoyable.
So do you have like a master Excel list of like, okay, here's journalists in the gaming industry, here are the preferred genres, here's mechanics, so that way when you have a game pop up, you could just like filter it by
That would make my life so much easier probably. Yeah. But honestly, I do all PRs have the mega big Excel sheet with all the names and emails and everything for the journalists. I'm sure that some of them out there have like little annotations of which journalists like which genre, but honestly, for me, the system just like completely lives in my head. And I'm able to like see a name in the sheet and be like, that's the one. I read their Polygon article 6 months ago about this game. They're gonna love this one, and that's just because I'm a nerd. And
You're a superhero is what that is. To keep all that in your head, oh my gosh.
I just love reading games criticism, which helps a lot with my job. So I have a pretty solid understanding of the landscape, and sometimes I mess up, and sometimes I like reach out to a Souls-like fan, and I'm like, this cute little kitty cat game is perfect for you, and it's okay. And sometimes also journalists at outlets just have review editors, and they just cover everything that comes across their plate. So it's not possible to be able to just pitch to someone that I think would click, because it's just their job to review everything.
Do you try to hype them up like, hey, here's a few screenshots or the trailer? They get you like
always.
Oh yeah.
I always try to make that email enjoyable.
Yeah.
And digestible, because they're getting so many. And that's also what I think is necessary to understand is the responsibilities of the other person on the line, and that they have their tight schedule, they have their deadlines, their editors like, where's my review? It was supposed to be on my desk at 9 a.m. Type situation. Yeah. And I'm just trying to make everyone's life better at the end of the day. And yeah, I hope other PRs have that spreadsheet with those annotations, but it just I like to think that I just know everything off the back of my hand.
As far as I know, you do. So let's just lean into that. I'm not going to contest it.
Sure. Yeah. We'll go with that.
No, I love it. But because like this is part of that challenge of like getting things reviewed by articles or some of the easiest ways to at least to get eyes on it. Reading from like Polygon, right? IGN, Kotaku, right? There's a lot of sources. Even now, like you see huge publications like Washington Post, New York Times, NPR. They also have video game columnists that are just also focused on it. When I first heard that, I was like, NPR has video game reviewers. This is exciting. This is like I feel seen all of a sudden. So
oh my gosh.
right, they've got it. But I love that you also earlier were talking so positively about like content creators, because I think at times there's a little bit of eye rolling around the concept of like influencer marketing and what do they bring? What is the proven value? For you though, it seems like you really appreciate the opportunity and relationship to have between a game coming out and a content creator that's that right match. Have there been moments where you're like that there are certain content creators that you're like, I love what they do. They always give good, honest reviews. There's someone that you can go back to again and again.
Yes. My personal favorite, I suppose, genre of creator is like the video essayist, where it's just like games criticism again, but in like a very well produced video form.
Okay. You got to type. It's okay.
I think that's like such a interesting type of journalism, and I have a lot of respect for those creators who you can tell that they're really interested in presenting an idea and like curating a script around it, and I just have to admire the production value that goes into a lot of those video essays about games, and they're fantastic. And if I can have a game that gets that level of attention and dedication, it's like, oh, I love it. I love it for the team. And I also love the passion, and I can't quite understand speedrunners, but I have to admire the community and what they do. And I love seeing a game get ran.
Yeah.
Sped through. Yeah, it's
we're clearly both outsiders of this space.
The IGN devs react to speedruns bit that they have reoccurring is like so fun, and I have had games get featured on there, and the devs, it just like blows their mind that something that they thought was like a feature that they thought was bulletproof, their game just gets like ripped into the matrix by the speedrunner that finishes their 8-hour game in 8 minutes.
And you're like, that's not, they weren't supposed to do that. How'd they find that? Yeah.
Yeah. And of course there are like different communities of players. I have to respect like the cozy gamer community and the wholesome gaming community. I think that's such a special space that often marginalized communities feel safe in. And I love working with creators in that space because they have such a strong identity and understanding of their community's needs and interests, and the way that reflects on their own needs and interests. And it feels like those players that sort of flock around them and watch them play something, it's just an extension of themselves. And I'm sure that there's like, I would be interested to hear like the sticky like identity parasocial relationship stuff that comes with that. But it is really interesting to watch creators build worlds around themselves and being able to reach out to them to say, I have the perfect game for you. I think you would really enjoy this. And then they do. And their community is just as enthusiastic about that as they are. And also the really amazing benefit of those creators to funnel a lot of like the constructive community feedback, and be the one to say like, oh, I saw, my chat was like really talking about this feature and they didn't really like it, and I also like really struggled with it.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to change that? Like those types of really candid conversations with creators are really, really helpful for a PR person on the studio side or the publisher side, to gather that type of feedback and improve a game. And I think that type of feedback should be welcomed when received in a respectful way, of course, but should be processed and reflected upon by those studios and by the PR person. So I think there's like lots of ways to foster that type of relationship between studio and creator. Of course, there are like influencer streamers who you can tell when they just like aren't really that enthusiastic about a game, and then as soon as like their paid segment's over, they switch back into what they really want to be playing. But I think that is an opportunity for a PR person to see, oh, actually they're switching to this other thing that they're really enthusiastic about. They didn't really want to play this other game. Okay, I'll find a a game for them actually next time that we work together, that they won't want to switch away from. So it's all just a learning process, and it's still
that's a healthy approach.
That's a healthy approach.
I feel like I would initially, I'd have to check my ego a bit, but like, I'm kind of hurt. You just immediately hopped over. But you're right. Like it's again, you're playing such a smart matchmaker here of like, okay, I take this as feedback. Even though they're not saying it, you can watch the behaviors and say, okay, this wasn't as enjoyable for me. Let's find something else that could be a better fit. That's so smart when you're trying to build relationships, because again, all these are very important and only valuable if they're honest. If it's they're going through and they're just going through the motions, it's not the kind of interaction or the community that you want, or they're not going to tell you very clearly if they liked the game or if there's improvements that could have been valued. So you really want to make sure that that door is open. Goodness, that is a lot to handle.
Yeah, being a PR person means like really having to check your ego at the door, and to just like be able to level with people on a very human level. And that's something I always strive for, even if I don't succeed. It's always something I want to be doing next time. And internally to create a system where hopefully you're not the only PR person on the team, but if you are, to have a level of sustainable workplace habits, a level of like very simple automation, so that you can actually make time and space to have those relationships and to be able to maintain those throughout. I have relationships with journalists that I've maintained throughout my career, and those are precious to me. I want to continue to maintain those, because I get to see people grow in their careers too, and it's so rewarding to be able to watch journalists jump from outlet to outlet and rise in their careers and become stronger in their voice. It's like a little PR dream to see other people thrive. So that's like the North Star always.
I love hearing that from you, because I think that's another way that really hones in on who you are and how you approach this, is that there's plenty of people who could see it like, I need to reach this journalist because they have a job and we can fulfill, and it's transactional. But you get invested. You see them as people. You're seeing them as, how do we help each other? How do we create this a space where it's not just work feels like work, but it's work that we love, work that we're excited about, work that we want to talk about and produce. And I think that's such a beautiful approach that we can be jaded by in our working environment that we have from time to time, where we might feel like we're burned out, or we have to hit deadlines, or it's about money. That those ideals of seeing people for people, of wanting to create things that'll excite us and help everyone out, it's not out of reach. It really isn't. I want to thank you so much for coming. We're running out of time. So I'm so sorry, because you are such a delightful individual. Thank you for coming on to PinkPixels and having such honest and good conversations with us. Speaking of maintaining relationships, how can people stay connected with you? They want to support you, see what work you're up to, any projects or anything, charities that you want to support or call out. I want to give you this chance. Give us anything and everything.
Yes, I will quickly rattle off some things. You can follow me on Twitter. Is really the only place that I'm like super public. I'm mostly like behind the scenes. But I'm at Ghouls Ingle on Twitter, and you can also follow Papagenda Co, which is my new role. I just started last week as senior PR manager, and I'm so thrilled. That team is so cool. I'm just trying to match their coolness, and
Pretty cool.
I'm so excited to see what we'll work on together. And yeah, I also would love to direct people to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, which is providing humanitarian relief to people in dire need. So I would love people to learn more about that and visit that website to learn more about how to donate and support.
Thank you. Honestly, again, you're a consistent person through and through, of caring, of wanting to make this place better. Thank you so much for bringing your voice on here and sharing with us. We'll see you all, good friends, next week. So if you're tuning in for PinkPixels the first time, I hope you love this conversation, because I know I did. And if you didn't, that's all I'm going to say. No. Come back and join us time and time again, because every Monday we have good conversations. It's an opportunity for us to continue to expand our horizons, learn something new, and take that approach as we go into this week. We talked about a lot of really good action items of thinking like, what do we do? How do we bring our approach in to make the spaces more welcoming? How do we think about how we live and who's it for and what motivates us within this space, and how we build connections and relationships and allow ourselves and others to be seen and to exist and to thrive. So I hope that you come back. I hope that you take that mentality and approach as we go through the week, as we become better for ourselves and for others. Jules, any final words?
Thank you so much for having me. This was a really, really delightful chat.
Thank you. All right, good friends. We'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.